all-time most popular videos on this channel is my Tower of Fools book review. And more specifically, I want to point out the comments that come from the popularity of that, whereas a lot of them are, dude, can you please review the other two in the trilogy? So here we go. This is the review for the entirety of the Hussite Trilogy. The Hussite Trilogy was written by Andrzej Sapkowski, who formerly wrote the Witcher book series as a whole. And the Hussite Trilogy contains the three books, The Tower of Fools, Warriors of God, and Light Perpetual, which are another three books that were English translated from Polish. And what I can say first and foremost is that the Hussite Trilogy have absolutely no scenes stripped out. The translation is mostly stellar. I really didn't see many problems with the translation of these books as I did the Witcher book series. Now, this book series mainly revolves around Renovan of Balewa, who is basically a doctor. And the story starts out with him banging his beloved and people taking that the wrong way, and thus starts a war because, okay. And the war just kind of continues throughout the entire trilogy of books, and that's fine because all three of these books are very intriguing in their own respects. Now, there are some downsides, especially in the middle chapter book, Warriors of God, but we'll get to that. Now, I strongly love this trilogy as a whole. Don't get me wrong. There are some major quirks and flaws with this book trilogy compared to The Witcher, but the Hussite Trilogy as a whole, I really enjoyed. It's an entertaining read. The biggest highlight I would have to say in the Hussite Trilogy is the comedy in it, and it's not even really the parts that are supposed to be funny. It's the unintended comedic elements. So this is the most simplistic way I can explain this trilogy in the funniest way as well. Think of a war happening and the main character is a doctor, and the doctor finds somebody wounded in said war, and the war is also about religion, okay? So there's the preface. Now, the scene is the main character doctor trying to alleviate the pain of the wounded while war is raging around religion. And while he's trying to sew up somebody's fucking stump of a leg, we got this priest coming around. Meanwhile, they're hacking off this poor man's foot. And really, that's a simplistic, funniest way to explain this trilogy. It's just so bizarrely funny. And I don't think Andrzej Sapkowski intended it to be as fucking funny as it is. But god damn it, it's funny as fuck. Now, as I said, the intro of this series, of the story, is funny within itself. Renovan is getting some, and that sparks an entire war. And then the war ends up being about religion. And Renovan's just in the middle of it like, I'm just trying to get back to my beloved. And then random twisted up plot shit happens throughout the entirety of the storylines. And the gripe, probably the biggest gripe I have with this trilogy compared to The Witcher, is its focus. So The Witcher is always fully focused on the main central storyline, despite how many POV transitions it has. And The Witcher had a fuck ton of POV transitions, not even from chapter to chapter like Game of Thrones does it right. I mean, The Witcher's chapters had POV transitions. And the Hussite Trilogy kind of has that, but in Warriors of God especially, there's just so much redundant shit that I would consider boring and just redundant and just nonsensical, that Warriors of God kind of just meandered through and just kind of wove through its story until you got to the third book, which is amazing. But Warriors of God is really just, it has the middling chapter effect where you know there's going to be an end to the story, but you know that it's not going to be in this book. So Warriors of God feels like such a meander of a book read, and I'm pretty sure that's the longest book in this trilogy series. And then we have Light Perpetual, which is kind of just an end to it all, and it's the second longest, I believe. But the thing about Light Perpetual, the writing of it, I have all 3 books in hardcover, so each book is 500 to 700 pages in length, but you can clearly tell a distinct difference between the writing of Light Perpetual and the first 2, in the sense of, I'm pretty sure there were so many lines of writing in Light Perpetual, but they wanted to keep the book looking around the same length as the first 2 books, that Light Perpetual, while you're reading it, it feels really crammed into a book. Now, that's not about the story at all. It's more so having to do with the publication of the book. Not even really the writing. It's just the publication. The Light Perpetual just feels so overbearingly long for a book that's like 656 pages hardcover. But with that being said, though, I thought it was a great end to this otherwise mostly great trilogy book series. I loved that there was some random shit that happened at the very end of Light Perpetual, that random characters pop up. If I remember correctly, they were characters I wasn't even introduced to prior, and then they explained very smoothly in the story who they were, and then they did some shit that just kind of ended the story, and then Renovan's story concluded, and then that was the end of it all. And that's one thing I do appreciate about Andrzej Sapkowski's writing method. When he wants to finish a book series, you know it's finished. Because honestly, spoilers for all Sapkowski books, honestly, at the end of every Sapkowski book, there's going to be a lot of major fucking deaths from some random shit happening. And it's kind of like every time Sapkowski wants to finish a book, he's like, I got it. I know exactly how to end this. Fuck that dude, kill him. And everybody gets beheaded. Now, the Hussite Trilogy, the bad part about this compared to The Witcher is that The Witcher was its own creative, unique, brand new IP of books and stories, whereas the Hussite Trilogy, I've researched this, I don't really know exactly what they're talking about, but the Hussite Trilogy is based within real-life wars that took place, I guess, in Poland or Germany somewhere, and Andrzej Sapkowski used that as inspiration for the Hussite Trilogy storyline, and because of that, that's another fault. It just doesn't feel like the Hussite Trilogy was able to reach its max potential, because it always felt like it had to stay on one plot point. That way it was as historically accurate as it could be, while also being a very fictionalized recreation. That's one thing I don't like about these pseudo-fictional, non-fiction type stories in books. That's the point I don't like about them. It's that they want to make some fantasy epic, but then they have to stick to real-life historical accuracies. Why? Because people will berate the fuck out of them if they don't. Okay, so if you're a fantasy writer, why are you basing your fantasy story in a real-life war where you kind of have to pander to what actually happened? Now again, don't quote me. I don't know shit about the real-life historical accuracies. I'm just stating shit I've researched and read online. I could be wrong. I don't think I am, just based around how these books are read and written. Overall for me, the Hussite Trilogy is still a phenomenal read, nowhere near on par as The Witcher, but the one thing the Hussite Trilogy does actually better than The Witcher is great English translation. For fuck's sake, that's all we needed in The Witcher, and that would have been a 10. The Hussite Trilogy, though, falters in a lot of ways that The Witcher never did, and for me, that's kind of a really big takeaway for this otherwise exceptional book trilogy. So overall for me, I'll have to say the Hussite Trilogy is a very strong 8 out of 10, because I didn't really like the historical accurate representation inside of a fantasy epic. Fantasy epics are meant to be fictional, guys. Just so that we can, get in our own little noodles and visualize shit. Whereas, historical accuracies, you can visualize it, but it doesn't really have the tongue-in-cheek epicness that you so strive to want to read. So Hussite Trilogy, 8 out of 10. Thank you.